Subscribe to our channel and press the bell icon so that you never miss any video lesson from RAU'S IAS Study Circle. Hello and welcome to Daily News Simplified, an answer to what, why and how of newspaper reading from your UPSC perspective. Today we shall discuss the important news appearing in the New Delhi edition of the Hindu newspaper dated 20th July 2020. The news to be discussed has been displayed on your screen and timestamping for the same has been provided in your description box below. So on this note, let's start today's discussion from your UPSC prelims as well as mains perspective. The first news to be discussed appears as an article on page number 7. It says, a chance to restore the rule of law. Extrajudicial killings of Vikas Dubey is the last wake-up call for our democracy and the judiciary. So this article clearly explains that it is talking about the extrajudicial killings which took place in the case of Vikas Dubey and various other encounters. So overall the question is that what is extrajudicial killing and whether the authorities are allowed under the Indian laws to go for extrajudicial killings. So overall this article deals with extrajudicial killings by design, that is with a particular purpose, and extrajudicial killings in all sense means use of excessive forces by police authorities or any other government authority which is not sanctioned by law. So with respect to extrajudicial killing, this article talks about weakening of rule of law in the country, including different states across India, as these cases of extrajudicial killings as well as police tortures have surfaced in the past few days. Now with respect to the killing of Vikas Dubey in this particular article, the author highlights two aspects. First, it says that either the police has become too strong or the judicial system in our country has become too weak. So there are two aspects to be discussed here, that is weak judicial system on one hand and strong police regime over empowering the weak judicial system on the other hand. So these two are the main aspect with respect to this particular article. So it is in this regard that there is a need to have an overall reform of the criminal justice system, and this has been suggested by Malimat's committee. So with respect to ensuring rule of law, there are two aspects here. First is with respect to taking preventive steps. So the question is that are there any preventive steps provided under the Indian laws with respect to preventing or stopping these extrajudicial killings by the police? And the second aspect is that if extrajudicial killings have taken place, then what is the next course of action as provided under law? So it is in this regard the author highlights that in case of these extrajudicial killings, the perpetrators of such crime needs to be brought to justice, and this will be done through a fair and independent investigation. So the question remains as to how to ensure fair and independent investigation by using scientific tools at hand, including the use of forensic science at state's disposal. Now another point to be understood here is with respect to the asymmetrical balance of power between the police and investigating officers as well as the accused. And this asymmetrical power balance creates impunity among police officers because of lack of any fear of lawful action. And this impunity among police officers also throws off the balance of power equation between the police on one hand and the accused on the other hand. So in such situation, the question arises is that what are the remedy available at hand under the courses of law? So in this regard, the remedies available are with respect to following laws, procedure and guidelines, and also enforcing and complying with such laws. And this will only help to ensure a fair and independent investigation process. Now when a person is arrested, there are various laws which protects the person who is arrested. And these laws are provided under the Constitution of India through Article 20, 21 as well as 22, and also under various criminal laws such as Indian Penal Code, Criminal Procedure Code as well as Evidence Act. So the point to be understood here is that there are enough laws in India to safeguard rights of a person who is arrested under Constitution of India as well as various criminal laws. However, its enforcement in the right manner and a fair and independent investigation process and the compliance of laws becomes the real question. So from this discussion, the question which actually arises is that who will ensure the compliance with respect to enforcement as well as compliance of fair and independent investigation process. Is it the judiciary? Is it the state? Or is it the central government? Now, public order as well as police have been provided under state list of 7th schedule of the Indian Constitution. So primarily it is the duty of the state government to ensure a fair and independent investigation process. However, if states fail to perform their duty diligently, then the judiciary intervenes and at times gives this power to the center government by transferring the case to the Central Bureau of Investigation. So, following the procedure established by law and ensuring compliance of laws, it is primarily the duty of the state government to ensure a fair and independent investigation process. However, judiciary can intervene if states fails to perform their important functions. Now, with respect to understanding the concept of extrajudicial killing, I have taken this extract from an article from Columbia Human Rights Law Review. It says that the execution of a political prisoner, murder of a civilian through indiscriminate attacks on her village, killing of a soldier who is hors de combat, that is, a soldier who is out of action due to injury or damage, and each of these deaths constitutes an extrajudicial killings. It further says that there are of course some instances when a death does not rise to the level of an unlawful killing. So here are two aspects highlighted here. One is extrajudicial killings and another is unlawful killing. It says that there are of course some instances when a death does not rise to the level of an unlawful killing, but these deaths are not lawful either. So these unlawful killing are not lawful or not sanctioned by law. They are inhumane, unnecessary and illegitimate. So these three words becomes important with respect to both extrajudicial killings as well as unlawful killings. That these killings are inhumane, they are unnecessary and they are illegitimate. That is not sanctioned through law. It further says that they fail to comply with the most basic principles of humanity and offer no due process to victims. So again, another important aspect highlighted here is with respect to compliance of laws. So overall it says that these killings fail to comply with the most basic principles of humanity and offer no due process to victims, no opportunity to defend themselves through the rule of law. And because of this, extrajudicial killings represent an arbitrary deprivation of life. Now, this extract has been written from the context of United States law with respect to Torture Victims Protection Act 1991. However, this aspect of extrajudicial killings representing an arbitrary deprivation of life also impacts Article 21 of the Indian Constitution. It says that they constitute the raison d'etre for the human rights framework established after the Second World War. So clearly, there are certain highlights with respect to extrajudicial killings. And these highlights are that these killings are inhumane, unnecessary and illegitimate. And overall, there is a lack of compliance of laws. And also that it is against rule of law. So these can be said to be some of the important highlights with respect to extrajudicial killings. And this extract has been taken from the article When Death Becomes Murder, a primer on extrajudicial killing by William J. Aceves. Now, since extrajudicial killings leads to an arbitrary deprivation of life, hence it is also protected under Article 21 of the Indian Constitution. So in this regard, let us go through important provisions of the Indian Constitution, which provides for right to life and personal liberty and also certain protection from arrest and detention. So with respect to Article 20, 21 as well as 22 of the Indian Constitution, we can say that overall Article 21 ensures procedures established by law. Article 20 prevents from police as well as custodial torture and also from self-incrimination before the police. That is providing evidence against oneself or incriminating oneself before the police officers, as such evidence is not admissible before a court of law. And lastly, Article 22 provides for procedure to be followed in case of arrest, as any person who is arrested and detained in police custody shall be produced before a nearest judicial magistrate within 24 hours. And such persons shall have right to legal representation of their choice. So these are some of the protection provided under the Indian Constitution to persons who are arrested by police. And from these provisions of the Constitution, important guidelines have been provided under the various criminal laws of the country, including CRPC, that is Criminal Procedure Code, as well as Evidence Act. And also, Article 20, 21, and 22 of the Indian Constitution is in compliance with the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. Further, in the important Supreme Court judgment in D.K. Basu versus State of Bengal, the Supreme Court came up with a set of guidelines on arrest of a person, and these guidelines have now become part of Criminal Procedure Code after an amendment in 2008. So in this regard, let us go through these important set of guidelines which have become part of Criminal Procedure Code, especially with respect to arrest of a person and duties and responsibilities of police officer. Now it highlights that Chapter 5 of Criminal Procedure Code deals with arrest of person by the police officer and accordingly has laid down elaborate duties and responsibilities of the police under various provisions of the law. Now it highlights about two important aspects with respect to arrest, that is cognizable offense and a person is arrested for a non-bailable offense. Now cognizable offense are such offense under which a police officer may arrest a person without any warrant, and cognizable offense has been defined under CRPC, whereas with respect to non-bailable offense it has also been defined under CRPC, and it says that when a person is accused of non-bailable offense, then in such instances bail to such person can only be granted by a court of law and not by the police officer. So you must know the difference between cognizable and non-cognizable offense as well as bailable and non-bailable offense, and both these have been defined under the Criminal Procedure Code. Moving further, the Criminal Procedure Code also provides for rights of person arrested and duties of police officer. So it highlights that every police officer while making an arrest shall bear an accurate, visible and clear identification of his name, which will facilitate easy identification. So basically, the person who is being arrested must see the name of the police officer on his badge. It then says that while making an arrest, the police officer must prepare a memorandum of arrest which shall be attested by at least one witness. Now this one witness must be a member of the family of the person arrested or a respectable member of the locality where the arrest has been made. So this becomes important with respect to attesting of the arrest by at least one witness. That is, at least one person should know that a police has arrested a person or arrested the accused. It further says that such arrest must be countersigned by the person who is arrested. So the memorandum which is being prepared by the police officer needs to be countersigned by the person who is arrested by the police. Further, the police officer making the arrest must inform the person who is arrested that he has a right to have a relative or a friend named by him to be informed of his arrest in case the memorandum of arrest is not attested by one of the family member of the person accused or the person who is arrested. So it highlights that in case the memorandum is not attested by one member of the family of the person accused, then at least a relative or a friend named by the arrested person must be informed of the arrest of such person. So these are some of the protection provided under CRPC, especially with respect to arrest of a person. Further, the person who is arrested in a police station, the police station concerned must display the name of the person who is arrested on its notice board. It says that there shall be established a police control room in each district which shall display on its notice board the names and address of the persons who are arrested and the name and designation of the police officers who has made the arrest. So the notice board must display the name and address of the person arrested and the police officer who has arrested the person. Further, the person who is arrested has a right to advocate of one's choice, and this right flows from Article 22 of the Indian Constitution. It further says that the person arrested to be informed of grounds of arrest and of right to bail. It says that every police officer arresting any person without warrants shall communicate to the person arrested full particulars of the offence for which he or she is arrested, as well as the grounds of such arrest. This aspect also flows from Article 22 of the Indian Constitution. Further, the police officer must also inform the person who is arrested that he is entitled to be released on bail and has a right to arrange for sureties on his behalf. Further, the person arrested not to be detained for more than 24 hours in a police lockup. Now, this aspect also flows from Article 22 of the Indian Constitution. So we see that the Criminal Procedure Code has effectively laid down the guidelines provided under Article 22 of the Indian Constitution. Now, as you can see that Article 20 prevents a person who is arrested from police torture and also from self-incrimination. And accordingly, a separate article appears on page number 7 with respect to a anti-torture law. So, after this discussion, we shall also go through this particular news appearing on page number 7 with respect to anti-torture law flowing from Article 20 of the Indian Constitution. So, with respect to this discussion, we can say as a way forward that there is a need for separate law and order and investigation functions of police, and this way forward is based on the recommendation provided by Malimat Committee on criminal justice reforms. Further, the article also says that there is a need to amend the Protection of Human Rights Act in order to empower National Human Rights Commission with investigative powers and functions at par with the police officers. Further, there is a need to fast track these cases of extrajudicial killings, especially where police officers are involved. Next, there is a need to define extrajudicial killings properly, and such killings must not be sanctioned by law. Further, there is also need to provide protection to witness in such cases of extrajudicial killings, and also to ensure that evidence is not buried by using forensic science laboratories of each state. So these can be said to be a way forward with respect to ensure that the extrajudicial killings does not take place at all. The next news to be discussed appears on page number 7 as an article. It says, why a separate anti-torture law? The need of the hour is to implement the existing recommendations of various commissions. Now this article has been written by an IPS officer. So he has given his side of the story with respect to protection of such police officers who are accused with respect to police torture. Now in this regard, you must know that a private member bill was presented in Lok Sabha in 2018. The name of the bill was Prevention of Torture Bill 2018, and the bill aimed to provide for punishment for torture inflicted by public servants, including police officers, or any person inflicting torture with consent or acquiescence of any public servant, and for related matters. However, one of the main concern of the author in this article is that the term torture has not been defined in this particular bill. And the term torture is more or less based on the terms defined in Indian Penal Code based on hurt as well as grievous hurt. Now section 4 of this particular bill provided for punishment for torture. It says that where the public servant or any person abated by or with the consent or acquiescence of such public servant tortures any person, and the torture for the person is for the purpose of extorting from him or any other person interested in him any confession or any information which may lead to detection of an offense or misconduct. Basically, violation of Article 20 of the Indian Constitution, especially with respect to self-incrimination. B. For the purpose of punishing him for any act, or C. On the ground of his religion, race, place of birth, residence, language, caste or community, or any other ground whatsoever. So it also infuses an aspect of Article 15 based on prohibition of discrimination on various grounds. And accordingly, such public servant who shall be accused of torture for these purposes shall be punishable with imprisonment for a term which shall not be less than 3 years, but which may extend to 10 years and shall also be liable to fine. So with respect to punishment for torture, this was the provision provided by the Prevention of Torture Bill 2018. Now this bill was also presented in Rajya Sabha in 2017 December as a private member bill, and again this bill was presented in Lok Sabha in the year 2018 with similar clauses. Now as we have mentioned about Article 20, so in this regard let us go through again the provisions of Article 20 and also an important provision of Evidence Act of 1872. Now Article 20 provides for protection in respect of conviction for offences. And Article 20 clause 3 says that no person accused of any offence shall be compelled to be a witness against himself. So at times police uses torture for confession of certain crimes which may or may not have been done by the accused. And it is in this regard the Evidence Act says that confession caused by inducement, threat or promise, whereby it mentions that a confession made by an accused person is irrelevant in criminal proceedings if it appears to the court to have been caused by an inducement, threat or any promise. So, if it appears to the court that if any confession has been made on account of torture, then such confession shall not be admissible in a court of law. Further, it says that confession by accused while in custody of police not to be proved against him. It says that confession made by any person while he is in the custody of a police officer shall not be proved as against such person unless it be made in the immediate presence of a magistrate. That is, the accused must admit the same guilt before the magistrate. So it is in this regard, Article 20, Clause 3 as well as provisions of Evidence Act 1872 becomes important with respect to confessions obtained by a police officer with the help of torture or custodial violence. So it is in this regard, the author in this article who is an IPS officer suggests that the laws of the country has enough provisions with respect to safeguarding the rights of an accused and also with respect to dealing with cases of custodial violence. So in this regard, there is no need to bring in a new anti-torture law. Rather, there is a need to suggest important recommendations of suggestions with respect to police as well as criminal justice reforms. Now, the author also highlights that the provisions of Prevention of Torture Bill are not only vague but also very harsh for the police officers to discharge their responsibilities without fear of prosecution. Further, in many cases of custodial death, the Supreme Court has held that policemen found guilty of custodial death should be given the death penalty. However, the author has contradicted this judgment of Supreme Court. Now, according to the author, he does not think that there is a need for such harsh action against police officers in cases of custodial deaths. And according to the author, the prevalent laws in India are adequate to deal with cases of custodial violence, and these laws, with minor discrepancies, are well tuned with the provision of United Nations Convention Against Torture and other cruel, inhuman or degrading treatment. Now here it's important to know that India is a signatory to the UN Convention Against Torture but has not ratified the United Nations Convention. So according to the author, there is no need for a new law on anti-torture. Rather, there is a need to address the root cause of the problems related to investigations and prosecutions and implement recommendations of various commissions to implement necessary reforms. So overall, this is the suggestions of the author in this particular article. And since the author is an IPS officer, so he has given his side of the understanding with respect to day-to-day functions and responsibilities discharged by the police officers. Now this topic of United Nations Convention Against Torture has been covered comprehensively by Mehak ma'am in the DNS dated 4th July 2020. So to go through the important provisions of this United Nations Convention Against Torture, you can go through the DNS dated 4th July 2020 to get a comprehensive understanding of this United Nations law. And it's important to note that India is a signatory but has not ratified this UN convention. Now both these articles appearing on page number 7 becomes important from the perspective of GS paper 4, GS paper 3 as well as GS paper 2 from your mains perspective. Now under GS paper 4, as I have already highlighted, it gets covered under ethics in public administration, ethical concerns and dilemmas in government, laws, rules, regulations and conscience as a source of ethical guidance, accountability and ethical governance. Further, in probity and governance, this topic gets covered under information sharing and transparency in government and codes of ethics and codes of conduct, and also case studies on these issues. Further, in GS paper 3, this topic gets covered under various security forces and agencies and their mandate. And in GS paper 2, this topic gets covered under Indian Constitution and its important features and functions and responsibilities of the Union as well as that of the state. And from your prelims perspective, this topic gets covered under Indian Polity and Governance, Constitution, political system as well as rights issues. So we understand that this article, why a separate anti-torture law, as well as the article a chance to restore rule of law, becomes very important from our mains as well as prelims perspective. With this, let's move on to our next topic of discussion. The next news to be discussed appears on page number 12. It says pulse oximeters. Now during the time of COVID-19 crisis, it's important to know about pulse oximeter as it measures the amount of oxygen carried in the and this measurement of amount of oxygen carried in the body is even more important for asymptomatic patients, that is those patients who do not show any visible sign or symptoms of COVID-19. Now, pulse oximeters measures blood oxygen saturation level, and any level of 92% or below is considered dangerous. So, low level of oxygen in the blood may cause breathlessness, bouts of confusion or euphoria, chest pain, or even an increased heart rate. So, in this regard, it's important to know one's oxygen saturation level in the body. So, in this regard, we must understand about the importance of oxygen saturation level and how pulse oximeters calculate the oxygen saturation level in the blood. Now, blood oxygen saturation is also referred as SpO2, and this is measured through a comparison of hemoglobin in the blood carrying oxygen as compared to such percentage of hemoglobin in the blood not carrying oxygen. So primarily, the SpO2 level in the body is maintained through normal breathing process. So what happens is that the lungs takes oxygen that has been inhaled and binds it to hemoglobin that then travels throughout the body with the payload of oxygen. So basically, there are hemoglobins carrying oxygen and there are certain hemoglobins not carrying oxygen. And pulse oximeter basically calculates the blood oxygen saturation level by calculating the percentage or the ratio with respect to hemoglobin carrying oxygen and such hemoglobin in the blood not carrying oxygen. Now, low level of oxygen in the blood is known as hypoxemia, and hypoxemia can then lead to or turn into hypoxia, that is, having low level of oxygen in the tissues. And this is a very discomforting situation with respect to having low level of oxygen in the blood as well as in the body tissues. So, in this regard, a pulse oximeter is a device which is used to monitor the amount of oxygen carried in the body. And once the oximeter finishes its assessment, its screen will display the percent of oxygen in our blood coming from our heart as well as our current pulse rate. So, the oximeter displays the oxygen saturation level as well as the pulse rate. Now, let us understand how this device functions. Now, here it's important to understand that such hemoglobin which carries oxygen is darker in shade or darker in color as compared to such hemoglobin which does not bind with oxygen or which does not carry oxygen, and such hemoglobin which does not have oxygen or is deoxygenated hemoglobin is lighter in shade or lighter in color as compared to the hemoglobin having oxygen. And the pulse oximeter measures this comparison of hemoglobin which is darker in shade as compared to the hemoglobin which is lighter in shade. Now, the pulse oximeter does this by using light sensors or pair of light emitting diodes. Now, this pair of light emitting diodes emits red wavelength as well as infrared wavelength. So, when the machine is put on the tip of the finger, it starts measuring the oxygenated hemoglobin as well as the deoxygenated hemoglobin. Now, the infrared part of the LED within the oximeter measures or absorbs more infrared light. That is, the darker hemoglobin absorbs more infrared light, whereas the deoxygenated or the lighter hemoglobin absorbs more red wavelength. And it is based on this comparison or differential absorption of infrared and red wavelengths by the sensors based on kinds of blood passing through the fingertips helps in calculating the comparative ratio. That is, it helps in calculating the amount of oxygenated blood passing through a particular time as well as the deoxygenated blood passing through a same particular time. And it is in this way the pulse oximeter calculates the blood oxygen saturation level in the body. Now, acceptable range for SpO2 measures between 95 to 99%. However, SpO2 measurement below 92% is dangerous for the person as it can lead to breathlessness, bouts of confusion or euphoria, chest pain, increased heart rate, or any other discomfort related to blood oxygenation in the entire body. And low level of oxygen in the blood is known as hypoxemia, and hypoxemia can then turn into hypoxia, that is low level of oxygen being carried to the tissues. So in this regard, you must know about pulse oximeter as well as blood oxygen saturation level, which is measured as a percentage of blood saturation and referred as SpO2 measurement. Now, this topic becomes important primarily from the perspective of general science. With this, let's move on to our next news discussion. The next news to be discussed appears as an article on page number 6. It says, "Make the right call on Malabar going Quad. India's plan for naval coalition building alone will not credibly deter China's military power in the Indian Ocean region." Now, this topic becomes important primarily from the perspective of current events of international importance from your prelims, and in your mains gets covered under GS paper 2, especially with respect to bilateral, regional as well as global groupings, especially with respect to the Quad. Now, this news highlights that India is about to invite Australia to its trilateral Malabar naval exercise. Now, the trilateral Malabar naval exercise as of now comprises of India, United States as well as Japan. However, bringing Australia into the naval exercise will complete the quadrilateral group or the Quad. So once Australia becomes a part of this quadrilateral naval exercise, it in a way partially fulfills the vision of United States, as the US has always viewed Quad as a military alliance. So, with respect to deterring China in the Indian Ocean region surrounding India, India is considering to make Australia join the Malabar naval exercises, making the trilateral naval exercise as a quadrilateral naval exercise. Now, according to the author, once Australia joins the Malabar naval exercise, then the Quad will become a sort of an Asian NATO. Now, the question which arises is that will China get deterred by the military exercise carried on by India, United States, Japan, and Australia in the Indian Ocean region, also in the Bay of Bengal region? And will this exercise caution China with respect to India, opening up a new front in the Eastern Indian Ocean region? The next news to be discussed appears as an article on page number 6. It says, "Make the right call on Malabar going Quad. India's plan for naval coalition building alone will not credibly deter China's military power in the Indian Ocean region." Now, this topic becomes important primarily from the perspective of current events of international importance from your prelims, and in your mains gets covered under GS paper 2, especially with respect to bilateral, regional as well as global groupings, especially with respect to the Quad. Now, this news highlights that India is about to invite Australia to its trilateral Malabar naval exercise. Now, the trilateral Malabar naval exercise as of now comprises of India, United States as well as Japan. However, bringing Australia into the naval exercise will complete the quadrilateral group or the Quad. So once Australia becomes a part of this quadrilateral naval exercise, it in a way partially fulfills the vision of United States, as the US has always viewed Quad as a military alliance. So, with respect to deterring China in the Indian Ocean region surrounding India, India is considering to make Australia join the Malabar naval exercises, making the trilateral naval exercise as a quadrilateral naval exercise. Now, according to the author, once Australia joins the Malabar naval exercise, then the Quad will become a sort of an Asian NATO. Now, the question which arises is that will China get deterred by the military exercise carried on by India, United States, Japan, and Australia in the Indian Ocean region, also in the Bay of Bengal region? And will this exercise caution China with respect to India, opening up a new front in the Eastern Indian Ocean region? So, according to the author, what India needs from Quad is a sort of a strategic technology transfer in order to improve India's deterrence potential in Indian Ocean region from members of Quad. So in this regard, the author says that what India actually needs from Quad is not only naval exercises but also a strategic technology transfer so that India can improve its deterrence potential in the Indian Ocean region. And this will also help India to improve its anti-submarine warfare technology, which will help to deter the Chinese submarines, as the deterring capability of Indian Navy to deter Chinese submarines are yet not achieved by the Indian Navy. So this suggestion is basically to guard the Bay of Bengal region from Chinese attack or from Chinese naval presence in the Indian Ocean region close to the Bay of Bengal area. Now, another problem suggested by the author is that the militarization of Quad will draw India into unnecessarily security dynamics of Asia Pacific as well as in the South China Sea. Now, so far, we have witnessed US presence in the South China Sea along with China. So, it is in this regard that the United States would want India its presence in the South China Sea to deter China. Now, this will not act as a good policy for India because then China can straight away come into the Bay of Bengal region, thereby threatening India's sovereignty. Further, US would also want some cooperation from India to deal with China along the South China Sea, as we have just witnessed that United States sent 3 of its aircraft carrier groups in the South China Sea area. So, in a way, the militarization of Quad will draw India unnecessarily into the security dynamics of Asia Pacific and South China Sea, for which India may not be ready yet. So, with respect to South China Sea as well as Eastern Indian Ocean region, the United States would want India along with Australia for a sustained surveillance and deterrence operation with occasional presence of United States and Japan. Now, the problem here is that this entire strategy makes the Bay of Bengal region vulnerable for India, especially with respect to Chinese People's Liberation Army Navy presence. Now, the article says that so far Indian waters have not been threatened by China. However, this scenario may change in near future because of US strategy and also because of militarization of Quad, which China will see as a joining of coalition forces against itself. So it is in this regard the author says that India needs to not only improve its combat and deterrence capabilities to protect its sovereign territory and waters, but India would also need to assess short-term and long-term strategic goals along with key benefits, especially with respect to the militarization of Quad. So, as a way forward, the author says that China has been so far cautious and has made sure that its operation do not cross the threshold of conflict with India. However, for India, building up naval coalition will not deter Chinese naval power in the Indian Ocean region. So, India should work actively with respect to the aspect of technology transfer with members of Quad, especially United States and Japan. And lastly, the author concludes by saying that just by upgrading the trilateral Malabar exercise into a quadrilateral exercise will not suffice. And this strategy might work in the short term but will not be enough in the long term for a sustainable gain for India. So it says that without acquiring the requisite combat and deterrence capability through technology transfer, especially to ensure a submarine warfare technology, the benefits could prove ineffective in the longer run. Thus, this article with respect to Malabar naval exercises as well as Quad becomes very important from the perspective of international relations. The next news to be discussed appears on page number 14. It says China committing gross abuses against Uighurs as per the United Kingdom. Now it says that the Britain has accused China of gross egregious human rights abuses over deeply troubling treatment of ethnic and religious minority in China's western Xinjiang region. Now from our examination perspective, this region of China as highlighted in this map becomes important, as you should know that Xinjiang is a province of China in the northwestern region of China and also borders India. So Xinjiang is largest China's administrative regions and borders 8 countries, namely Mongolia, Russia, Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, Tajikistan, Afghanistan, Pakistan, as well as India. Now it highlights that most Uyghurs are Muslims and follow Islam, and their language is related to Turkish, and they regard themselves as culturally and ethnically close to Central Asian nations. Further, Xinjiang's economy has largely revolved around agriculture and trade, and important towns such as Kashgar thrives as hubs along the famous Silk Road. Now, in the 2000 census for China, Han Chinese made up 40% of the population of Xinjiang, along with large number of troops stationed in region, unknown numbers, along with unknown numbers of unregistered migrants. So, from the perspective of world geography, you should know the location of Xinjiang and also the fact that it borders 8 countries, including Mongolia, Russia, Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, Tajikistan, Afghanistan, Pakistan, as well as India. Now, after our discussion, this is your practice question for the day. The question is, consider the following statements. First, pulse oximeter measures blood oxygen saturation along with pulse rate. Second, low levels of oxygen in blood is known as hypoxemia. So the question is, which of the statements given above are incorrect? Options are A, 1 only, B, 2 only, C, both 1 and 2, and D, neither 1 nor 2. Now, coming to the answer of yesterday, the question was, consider the following statements regarding plea bargaining. It involves person charged with civil offense negotiating with the defendant for lesser fine. No, the statement is incorrect as it is for a criminal offense. Second, in India, plea bargaining can be initiated only by the accused. Yes, this statement is correct. So, the question was, which of the statements given above are correct? Here the correct answer is B, that is 2 only.